Urgent warning. This is apparently much bigger than we could have ever imagined, folks. And I want you all to remember what I told you about the future of food from my previous video uploads just a short while ago. And I'll let you guys comment down below and tell me what you think about not only the avian flu and the bird illnesses that are affecting chickens and egg production here in the United States, while also adding to food shortages and egg prices going through the roof, but also how China wants our eggs. And they're sending balloons carrying payloads and are spying on U.S. farmland and military bases and gathering intelligence as they prepare and are planning to make their next move. So according to the federal and state officials, yesterday the U.S. military shot down another unidentified object, and this time it was over the Great Lakes region. That, according to a congressional source briefed on the matter, said the Defense Department is confident there's been no collateral damage. And as you are all aware and remember that on February 4th, the U.S. shot down a balloon over the coast of South Carolina that had drifted across the U.S. over the course of several days. And that balloon had originated in China. And the U.S. said it carried surveillance equipment which would have been used to spy on the U.S. and send back intelligence from America to China. So yesterday's shoot down marked the third unidentified object to be shot down over the U.S. and Canada in just 3 days, and the fourth overall this month, with U.S. officials blasting another out of the sky using a Sidewinder missile over Alaska on Friday, and another unidentified object was shot down in Canada on Saturday. So there are a lot of unanswered questions that are running through everyone's heads, and with more than likely the one closest to the top of the list being why. So I want everyone to take a look at this. I'm going to put it on the screen so you can see it. China increasingly relies on imported food, and that's a problem. Now, I want to share with you some very important information from this article and ask that you provide your own opinions, comments, and suggestions below, and maybe we can all work together to figure this thing out and solve this problem that is likely to only get bigger and worse for us all if it continues to go on as an unsolved mystery. And while you're down there, please give this video a like so it can get a much needed push by the algorithm to reach more people and hopefully provide more insight and answers. Thank you all for your continued support, which helps me make these videos and bring you all these important updates, new information, and most importantly, the truth. Please subscribe and turn on your alerts to receive notifications for my next upload. So the article says that China has increased its reliance on food imports over the past 2 decades, prompting concerns among officials who worry that disruptions to food supply chains could trigger domestic unrest. And more so in particular, this reliance has heightened China's sensitivity to food supply disruptions caused by geopolitical tensions such as Russia's war in Ukraine. And China has less than 10% of the planet's arable land, capable of producing a quarter of the world's grain and feeds 1/5 of the world's population. Yet despite its domestic production, China has been a net importer of agricultural products since 2004. And today it imports soybeans, corn, wheat, rice, and get this, dairy products. Today, China imports more of these products than any other country in the world. So to make a long story short, China has grown more dependent on foreign imports. And between the year 2000 and 2020, the country's food self-sufficiency ratio decreased from almost 94% all the way down to almost 65%. And it's likely to continue falling. It is important to note that a primary factor behind why China is looking for imported food sources is that Chinese people's dietary demands have become increasingly more sophisticated. This driven by a growing city-dwelling middle class that is pursuing safer, more diverse, and higher quality food, with concerns about food safety in particular increasing demand for imports. Now, prior to 2022, China's prolonged lack of strict food safety regulations allowed for opportunistic domestic producers to produce unsafe or even toxic food, with several deadly food safety scandals over the past 2 decades hurting Chinese people's trust in their local brands, which has led them to prefer foreign ones instead. Like, for example, when contaminated baby formula was released to consumers before ultimately killing 6 babies and poisoning 300,000 children back in 2008. Many Chinese parents still favor foreign baby formula brands in fear of getting a hold of a bad batch that could wipe out their babies. Additionally, imports tend to be cheaper than local options, and that's because of higher costs and lower efficiency to grow certain food products in China. For example, The cost to grow soybeans in China is almost 150% times more than it is in the United States, and the yield is 60% less. And because wages are lower for farmers than for factory workers and other urban occupations, farmers feel incentivized to abandon the profession altogether. So it's likely that China's food import dependence, their food import demand, will likely increase as the amount of arable land continues to diminish. And my guess is probably around the year 2030, we'll be seeing a pivotal breaking point between far less arable land and far more Chinese people and mouths to feed. In just the 6 years between 2013 and 2019, China lost more than 5% of its arable land due to factors such as excess fertilizer use and land neglect, plus extreme weather, environmental degradation, and water scarcity and pollution, and climate change only further exacerbated their problems, with experts projecting a 10% reduction of China's national average crop yields annually. So why exactly has China been so interested in the US lately and flying over largely unpopulated areas more so here recently? Well, since 1949, Chinese Communist Party leaders and policymakers have consistently prioritized food security as an indispensable prerequisite to maintaining power. And China's last nationwide food crisis was the Great Famine from 1959 to 1961, the largest famine in human history. It led to 30 million people starving to death and about the same number of people lost or postponed new childbirths. The Great Famine then initiated the decade-long Cultural Revolution beginning in 1966 and lasting 10 years until 1976. And although current Chinese leaders do not publicly discuss such policy-induced catastrophes, they have indeed lived through these events, and their continued prioritization of food self-sufficiency would suggest that they would not want to repeat such costly and deadly mistakes yet again. While just a few years ago, during the C-19 pandemic, food supply disruptions and lockdown-induced food shortages showed that China's political system remains vulnerable to food insecurity, which sparked collective grievances that were further aggravated by food shortages, which contributed to a burst of protests in more than a dozen cities. Demonstrators chanting, "We want food, not C-19 tests." Now, it's a rare sight to see the Chinese defect and form mass protests against their government. So you know it must have been very bad for that to happen, and worth the risk that their government could have retaliated against them in brutal and violent ways. And so today, Chinese leaders consider food security an integral part of national security. And with Article 22 of the 2015 China National Security Law requiring the state to take comprehensive measures to ensure food security, safety, and quality, well, folks, it almost makes perfect sense to easily see the writing on the wall. China is in search of food security, and they are looking right here in our backyards to find it. Now, I cannot say with any extreme certainty that China is in fact sending over unmanned balloons with the intention of collecting information and gathering intel that will impact our food supply here in the United States. But with that being said, I also cannot say with any extreme certainty that they are not either. And if so, would it be for our limited egg production that is already experiencing its own strains here domestically? I mean, there was even a time when Chinese people considered eggs a useless byproduct of raising chickens. But those days are long gone, and now China as a country is a major importer of eggs from exporters around the world, including Brazil, Malaysia, Russia, and Ukraine. In 2020 alone, China imported more eggs than ever before, thus climbing their way up the ranks towards the top of the list to become the world's #1 largest importer of eggs. But perhaps it is more than just our chickens and American egg production that China is looking to gather intel on. We know that real estate has been a particularly hot topic of interest for them, especially U.S. farmland, as well as lower price, more affordable housing options for immigrants to move into, with keen interest on property near U.S. military bases. Now, at this time, their true mission's objective has not been made clear, but I think it is something that we should all be taking very seriously and monitoring with a close eye. So please share your thoughts and comments below and engage with one another in the comment section, and maybe, just maybe, we can begin to connect some of these dots together to produce a slightly clearer picture. And until further notice, we can hope and pray that Mr. Biden knows what he's doing in the White House to keep our country safe and protected. Now, I'm sure planning and prepping will be at the top of all of our lists, preparing for what could likely happen tomorrow or the next day, depending on just how desperate China gets, or even worse, how desperate U.S. food wholesalers get with the potential likelihood of considering to export American farmers' egg yields to China for higher prices, which would only then create scarcity here at home, limited supply while demand remains and or increases due to shortages and perceived panic, thus driving up prices at Walmart for a carton of a dozen eggs even further than it already is now. Man, I sure hope things get better soon. Thank you all for watching, and please make sure to check out the description for important links and additional information. Until next time, you guys take care, be safe. I'll see you real soon. Bye.